Okay. Welcome. Our guest today is Erin McFarlane. She is the VP of Innovation with Fairmarkit. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Melissa. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Yes. So for transparency, I have known Erin since probably around 2016. So full transparency there. But I did invite her to be a guest today, primarily because of what she's doing with Fairmarkit. So over the last year, I've been really focused on the future of procurement technology and where that is leading our transformation. And we've noticed that procurement, companies, organizations are working with 40% more suppliers as of 2022 than they have ever before. And primarily with that new influx of suppliers is because we have a lot of startups. And these startups are there solving very specific business challenges that these enterprise applications haven't really either been able to do, or because they're focused on the full life cycle of suite of products, some of these smaller business challenges just aren't in their immediate roadmap. So now you have a group of startups using AI technology, able to solve some of those business challenges that we have before. And when looking at companies that I wanted to talk to, Fairmarkit has been very visible. It is still considered a startup. It's worked through, and I think just recently, another series of funding. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And also, this is a unique story with Erin herself. She's been in industry her entire career up until about 3 years ago, and then just took the plunge and shifted to startup. So there's a lot of things that we really want to explore with you today, Erin.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to talk about this. You and I worked together while we were in industry, sort of sitting on the procurement side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's been an exciting few years up here in Boston.
So let's start with that. Again, if you go back on your LinkedIn, you've been in industry, and every company, you've really been in those companies for at least a good 6 years. And then out of the blue 3 years ago, just shifted from what some people would consider stable income, stable industry. And these are very well-known companies, not, small companies. Mm-hmm. And then just went to a startup that was, and 3 years ago, Fairmarkit was still really young in its startup stage.
Yeah, it was very, very small. When I walked in, we were the interview was above a bar, the corner pub in outside of South Station, and I was employee number 10. So I mean, I was super early on the ground with Fairmarkit. Mm-hmm. But I think I saw, and I was lucky enough to see what the potential was around procurement technology. So you and I had rolled out some of the quote unquote cutting edge technology at a major bank. And we, by all notes, it was a successful project. But despite it being cutting edge and top of the line, there was still a lot of frustration that it didn't have the level of automation and data support that you get when you have, say, HR applications or IT applications or really marketing or any of the other pieces of the business. So there was sort of this expectation that, oh, well, now that we've modernized, we're going to be at that level and have that same level of intelligence behind our software. And it really didn't exist. So when that project came to an end, I had a choice. I could either stay with the safe choice, stay in industry and sort of continue working within the box, or try and do something new and different. And Fairmarkit was doing something new and different, was really looking at enterprise procurement in a very different way, rather than just putting a pretty face on the same processes over and over again. The mission was to really revolutionize the way enterprise procurement, specifically enterprise sourcing, works. Mm-hmm. And that resonated with me. The other thing that really resonated with me was this mission to make enterprise procurement more fair. more fair for enterprises to know that they were engaging with a supplier who was selling to them at the right price and bringing everything that they said they would, and also more fair to the suppliers, because it's so hard for small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses to get in to some of these big enterprises. So
Mhm.
I was inspired by the technology, but I was also inspired by the mission.
And that inspiration trumped the safety, security, the stability, the known, and really you went into something more risky. Because again, employee number 10 doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be a successful,
No, it was a big risk. It was a big risk. And I went back and forth on it.
Mhm.
I had a couple of different options on the table, and some of them were very safe and very straightforward. But so I'll tell you a little story. So right
Yes.
at the end of my tenure with the bank,
Mhm.
I was briefly moved onto another project, and the project was that I was in charge of revising the policy on policies.
Oh.
And that was kind of a light bulb moment. It was like, do I really want to be the one working on revising the policy on policies?
Hmm.
Is that really how I want to spend the next several years of my career, is with that level of bureaucracy? And my answer was no. I want to be able to be unfettered and use my creativity and really revolutionize things. And in order to do that, I think you have to be willing to take a risk.
Mhm. So 3 years later,
Mhm.
well, 3 years and
Yeah, three and a half.
3 years and 8 months later,
Mhm.
company is still going. You are what round series
Yeah,
just
we just
recently?
completed our Series C. We just announced on September 1st, and
Mhm.
that was 35.6 million, with
Impressive.
one of our first customers, ServiceNow, is joining us as an investor. So very exciting.
Mm.
And yeah, we now are working with some of the largest companies in the world, and helping them with autonomous sourcing, helping them manage their tail spend. And it's been an incredible journey. And it's really exciting to see Fairmarkit taking off like
Mhm.
wildfire.
So I recently, well, see, we're still in 2022. Earlier this year, I made a claim that we are, shifting away from the strategic and the agile. So 2015, the industry thought procurement organizations were in this agile state, and primarily to really to try to move more quickly to meet the constantly changing consumer demand. But I think you've just highlighted it because that was around the time that you also made that decision. Hey, we've got this enterprise, innovative at the time, and it's still not fulfilling everything we wanted to. So, the theory is, and with all the technology and the automation, we're now moving into this, and the term intelligent sourcing, intelligent procurement organization is out there, primarily because we now have access to AI technologies that can really collect and synthesize and understand large data sets, which now comes, bring it full circle and back to Fairmarkit. What are some of the things that you're solving? You mentioned tailspin, you mentioned automation, but can you give us some business challenges that Fairmarkit has really been able to succeed in?
So Fairmarkit, at the heart of what it does is it helps enterprises find the right suppliers
Mm-hmm.
for the stuff and the services that they're buying.
Mm-hmm.
You already mentioned that the supplier base has grown at most companies by exponential levels.
Mm-hmm.
There are far more suppliers at your fingertips to buy from than ever before, but the knowledge about who sells what and who has what in stock and who's capable of supplying you with what is locked down. People store it in their heads. They store it in Excel spreadsheets. They ask their neighbor, hey, who am I supposed to buy this from? And procurement organizations really struggle to communicate who preferred suppliers are, who diverse suppliers are. Basically, who are you supposed to buy this stuff from? And what you end up with is people just going to Google or asking their neighbor. And that's not a particularly efficient way to go. So Fairmarkit fundamentally solves that problem. We digest and ingest into our machine learning system all of our customers' purchase history, and we align with their strategic initiatives, like diverse suppliers or preferred suppliers or sustainable suppliers. And then we use the power of that machine learning as requests come through the system to surface, hey, these are the top 5 or the top 10 suppliers that are likely to be able to help you find that item. And some of the real world challenges that has been is first and foremost, savings. Procurement is driven by savings, and one of the best ways to get savings is to leverage competitive quoting and competitive bidding. So we automate competitive bidding and competitive sourcing, and we're ending up with the results of 11.4% on average savings of everything coming through Fairmarkit, which is unbelievable.
And that's been consistent even through, because COVID was out
Yeah.
there, and then we're just maybe coming out of COVID, but maybe we might be going back. And then you've got, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
despite inflationary pressures, we expected to see those numbers drop, and they haven't. I mean, it's
Okay.
category by category and region by region, things change, but no, we're still maintaining those savings numbers, which is really cool.
Mhm.
But what we learned during COVID was that price, while it's important, and that's what we built the software to really highlight and get to know, in order to do price, you also have to get availability. So Fairmarkit got very good at finding things that were in stock when your regular supplier was out. So if you had a primary supplier and you've been using them for 20 years, that supplier has a major issue. Many companies were just left hanging, or they were left making desperate phone calls to anyone they could think of. And Fairmarkit solves that problem with business intelligence. So if you're out of stock with your current supplier, put it into Fairmarkit, and Fairmarkit will help you find not only just a secondary, third, fourth supplier, but frequently one that's already in your database that you're already working with that you didn't realize sold that thing.
And you're not just looking at suppliers within the company's database, you're actually looking externally at all the suppliers that are out there.
We can do both. Some of our customers have supplier rationalization initiatives. And if that's the case, then we support it by sourcing only through their existing supplier databases. They've got 35,000 suppliers, 40,000 suppliers. So we can narrow it, and we can really focus the machine learning on just their database. Or on a region by region, category by category basis, we can add in external suppliers from the marketplace. Yeah.
So if a company already has a procurement team that's, perhaps, a couple of years ago, when they had downtime for COVID, they went and looked at their suppliers. They thought they had rationalized it. They'd spent a lot of, focus, time, and energy. Help me understand why then bringing Fairmarkit in that scenario is adding additional value.
Because you may not be competitively sourcing everything that you could.
Got it.
Or you may be having your people spending their time on competitively sourcing things that are pretty rote and expected. So what Fairmarkit allows procurement teams to do is to take some of that tactical sourcing activity and let the machine do it, so they can focus on the strategic stuff at the top that really requires brain power. We say all the time, let's automate the boring stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're buying 10,000 headsets, that might not be something that you normally would do a full-blown RFP for. It's just headsets. But 20,000 headsets wasn't what you negotiated your catalog for. You figured you were going to be buying 5 here or there. So Fairmarkit enables procurement organizations to run RFQs and RFPs on that sort of mid-range spend, that $100,000 purchase, that $50,000 purchase, and automate it so that your people can spend their time on the $500 million activity or the $50 million contract.
Right. So Erin, earlier on, you mentioned the term tail spend. So is this what you're talking about also, or is tail spend something different? Because I know everybody seems to have a slightly different definition on what tail spend really means.
Absolutely. And most of our customers have a very different definition, but where I tend to place it is there's almost always this upper threshold where you're required to get, say, legal involved if you spend over X, or you're required to have an MSA in place, and whatever that top limit is. And sometimes it's 250, sometimes it's 100,000, sometimes it's 50,000. And then there's usually sort of this bottom level where companies will say, use your P card. It's under $1,000. We really don't care. But there's this huge space in between the two that is usually just left up to the business to do whatever they feel is appropriate. And most of the time, the business has better things to do than, than be procurement. So where we focus is in that sort of tactical spend that's between the bottom buying paper clips and using your P card, and the upper limit where you really need to have procurement professionals supervising and assisting and helping the purchase.
I had the luxury last year, 2021, of working with some folks, and in that process, they were, implementing a very large cloud procurement implementation. And one of the challenges that they kept coming back to was, what we talked about earlier. There's so many suppliers out there. I want to go and do this, what you call the tactical sourcing, this quick bid or quote, but I don't want to just do it within the suppliers that are in the database of the procurement application. I really need to understand and expand it to all these other suppliers that are out there. And I didn't realize that business challenge was as prevalent until having that conversation. And I understand that at that point in time, they were in conversations with Fairmarkit. And that's, I think, where Fairmarkit kind of came back on my radar. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think that's a really good example of a use case. Do you have another one that you've seen more recently?
So I think what has astonished me is that is watching the ways that our customers use Fairmarkit in ways we didn't anticipate. And I think what I've seen recently is our shift into handling some direct spend. We assumed that people would be very comfortable using autonomous sourcing and AI and, really focused around indirect. But what we saw especially over the last couple of years, is some of our customers dipping their toes into using Fairmarkit to manage some of their direct spend, and specifically to solve some of these supply chain challenges. So I've seen things like frozen broccolini in bulk and coconut oil and flanges and rubber and all of these direct materials flowing through Fairmarkit at remarkable volumes. And I think that's really where the difference is. When I've rolled out Ariba and some of these other tools, it was typical to see maybe 100 or 200 RFPs a year being done out of the sourcing module. What's fascinating about Fairmarkit is because it's all automated and because it's focused on the tactical spend, it's fairly typical for our customers to run 5,000 sourcing events a week.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
Yeah. So the impact that you can have when you're functioning at scale like that is just astonishing. And when we add in the machine learning's ability to prioritize diverse and sustainable suppliers, not only are you having an impact on the cost aspect, but we're very tactically helping large organizations make an impact in ESG. And it's very challenging to take a strategic supplier and move a strategic RFP to a small business. Very challenging because small businesses struggle to be able to fulfill those huge contracts. But parking lot resurfacing in Poughkeepsie, we can help you find a small business for that. And maybe one of those doesn't add up, but when you're sourcing 500 facilities sourcing events a week, and you're giving small businesses and women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses and sustainable business a seat at the table, impact is amazing.
On both sides, not just because a lot of times procurement will come across as, I'm going to give that small business a chance. But I think what I hear you saying is, it's not necessarily you're giving them a chance. It's a win-win, because you should recognize that this small business has value. It just doesn't have, $100 million of revenue like a larger company.
About a year ago, we decided to challenge the assumption that working with diverse suppliers was definitely going to cost more. There seemed to be this sort of assumption that in order to drive your supplier diversity programs, you had to be willing to spend a little more in order to fulfill these. And we've been able to challenge that with data and found that, at least in this tactical sourcing space, that's not true. You can still save money and work with small businesses and minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. And that's really cool.
which full circle my statement earlier, 2022, companies are working with, or should be working with 40% more suppliers than they've have before, simply because there's so many small businesses, startups that are out there that truly can provide value.
Absolutely.
I want to pivot a little bit more to the technology.
Mhm.
So let's see. Earlier this year, I went to a conference and I walked into the space where you have all your vendors, and all the vendors are showing off, demos of their application. And what I found, the statement that I was trying to pursue was, is everybody using AI? And yes, everybody's using AI, but the more I started to really dive into that, there are people out there that claim they're using AI, but then after reviewing their applications at depth, there's no AI technology. There's no machine learning, no deep learning, no neural networks, no, all the other, automation that we've been talking about. So I did hear you mention machine learning several times. So I want to come back and just ask you this question. Are you really using these AI technologies, and where and how are you using them?
So I saw a joke at one of these AI conventions that said,
Yeah.
machine learning is written in Python, AI is written in PowerPoint. But that resonated with me. I love that. So what we're using
Yeah.
are a combination right now of multiple technologies that fall into this digital space. The first is that we're really leveraging neural networks and natural language processing to understand requests coming through the system.
Mhm.
You know that people, when create requests for things in procurement, they call it jet fuel, but it's really fish tank supplies, right?
Yeah.
So we know that we can't trust categorization and stuff like that to necessarily drive our supplier recommendations. So one of the first places we invested in was in understanding what is it that you're really trying to buy.
Mhm.
So we're leveraging natural language processing to understand that a boot is a shoe, or that BLK means black, and doing that in multiple languages to auto sense, oh, is this request coming in French, or is it coming in English? So we're leveraging natural language processing there. And then the machine learning is really a deep learning
Mhm.
that can pull data in from multiple sources, and it's all focused around finding the right supplier for this request. And it learns every single night. So every night, using CI/CD, it's resetting itself for each individual customer and learning from the bid activity of suppliers. So as you purchase things and as you decide to award to one supplier over another, or invite or not invite certain people, it's learning. And the next piece on the bookends of both sides is that we're using robotic process automation
Mm.
to automatically create these sourcing events, in some cases automatically send them, and we even have the technology to automatically award. So really, we're layering those three technologies together with a little bit of with the neural networks tossed in, and even with a little bit of blockchain to trace these transactions as they wander through the system. So we're trying it all.
Oh yeah.
And we're using it all, and as things are used more by our customers and by our suppliers, we double down on that. But I would say kind of machine learning is the heart of what we
Mhm.
do. But we're taking advantage of a lot of next generation technologies to pull off the revolution.
Are you storing that customer's data, or because you're utilizing these technologies, you're not storing it? It's just a funnel of data that comes through. You read it, you do what you need to do with it, but you're not physically storing that customer's data on your back
Um,
end.
so we work with Amazon Web Services, so we do store some data
Okay.
on AWS.
Mhm.
Obviously, security has to be an important part of what we do. We
Mhm.
work with the biggest companies in the world, and their data is really important. But we don't store a ton of sensitive information, really
Okay.
any sensitive information. It's just purchase history. Who are you
Okay.
buying? What are you buying for? But that can be important, so we keep it really secure.
I like what you said, and I think this was a bit new for me, is I've heard of companies that are trying to automatically create, the RFX, pull it together. I've all, you and I have been on the sourcing side where we've created those manually in Word documents. We've put those in technologies to automate them as much as possible. But yeah, there's still some, tactical manual, I'm going to use the word tail end manual steps and activities that automation is supposed to support. But I hadn't really heard of anybody yet fully until just now that you're even looking at automating that piece of it.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is there are companies out there that are being told they have to continuously reduce their budgets so that we could keep staffing. And there are other procurement organizations that are really seriously looking at, I think I'm just going to offshore 45% of my organization to try to keep the cost down. But in the end, you lose some continuity, you lose some consistency, maybe some quality, and not necessarily because it's offshore, but the connectivity between the individuals building the strategy and the individuals offshore executing it. There's never going to be that I'm in sync with them. We're always on the same page. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. And then my head is just spinning like, wow, this would be great for this. And maybe this would help companies, not try to offshore as much because maybe they could use automation. And I think that's really what these podcasts are all about, is how is AI and data impacting us daily? Not just personally, but also professionally. And if a chief procurement officer or a chief analytics officer or, we've got so many C's now, chief transformation officer, chief digital officer. I think if they're not really focused on taking the effort to look at a lot of the startups and what they're offering, then I think they're doing a disservice to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, we agree. When people ask who is Fairmarkit's biggest competitor, I always have to pause because people don't believe me when I say this. Well, right now, there's nobody doing exactly what we do.
Okay.
Except people are solving this problem right now with offshore bid desks. And so we're a different way to solve the problem. Or if you want to split things up and have some things handled by a bid desk, or you really want to optimize that bid desk, Capgemini and Genpact are two of our best partners. And in both of those cases, they're giving a best of both worlds in that we do have offshore resources that are piloting Fairmarkit and piloting the systems, and you're able to achieve the results of having some people, some automation, and still some people that are native within the client who can oversee and create those strategies and use the technology to make sure that they're implemented properly.
So in your 3 years, it sounds like you're happy because you stayed with Fairmarkit since employee 10, which is still fantastic. You've got a big smile on your face. So this sounds like the right place for you. In the 3 years that you've been working with a startup, is there anything that you've learned that you'd like to share with others who might be thinking the exact same thing? I really don't want to be here. Startups seem really exciting and fantastic, but it's not just a leap of faith, it's a scary leap of faith.
Yeah, it's a scary leap of faith. So I think to a certain extent, you get out of it what you put in. Startups can be really fun, but they're also a whole lot of work. You have to be willing to put in the effort, put in the hours, put in the dedication, and also to be very comfortable with uncertainty. When you work at a big company, you have a job description, you have very clear marching orders, you have parameters and a way of working that's very clear. And when you switch to a smaller company, especially one that's in a high growth mode, you have to become very comfortable with constantly changing responsibilities, constantly changing direction, and there's no procedure on how to do that. There's no process, there's no policy. At first, you have to write those policies and you have to put those processes together. So I think the biggest transition for someone coming from a large organization and moving into a startup is embracing that chaos. And if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be really challenging and really hard because nobody's going to tell you the right way to get it done. And you have to work together with your team to figure it out, and in a much, much more collaborative way than most people realize. And I think a lot of startups fail because they're not being agile enough. They're trying to plan out 3 and 5 year roadmaps, and they're not responding to and watching, okay, how are our customers using this software? What are they doing? What do they need? What do they need to do? And pivoting to support their needs. Instead, I think some people either fall in love with the technology or they fall in love with a concept and try and make it fit. So finding product market fit means listening to your customers and changing what you're doing to support what they need.
Does that tie back to what you mentioned earlier about some of the things that surprise you, like some of the ways that you thought that your use cases were X, you're
Yep.
seeing that people are using the technology differently. And so your conversation now just about pivoting is, okay, well, we didn't think that we could use this software this way or this process. Let's go and talk about, let's add it in there. Let's see what other challenges are coming from that perspective. And that's what you're talking about, this agile, the shift.
Absolutely. One of the examples would be, we didn't carefully think out and plan a global expansion. Our customers took us there. I remember waking up one morning and ServiceNow, who I've talked about several times, I logged into the system to see what activity had been going on and found out that we had a couple of customers using Fairmarkit to source things in India. We're like, did you tell them they could do that? Did you tell them they could do that? Well, no, but they're doing it. Okay, I guess we got to figure out how to do that. So Fairmarkit's now being used in 71 countries.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and that wasn't something that we were like, we're going to do a global rollout. It was, okay, I guess we're going global, guys. So having that elasticity to be able to support our customers, to see what they were doing and support those business objectives, I think is part of the reason we've been successful.
As you're talking, I'm constantly thinking, and true or false. So question to you, Erin, true or false, would Fairmarkit have been able, the product and the services that you're providing the last 3 years, would Fairmarkit have been able to do that if those AI technologies weren't there?
No.
Right.
Hands down.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to do anything of what we're doing without the technologies, but that's all we've ever tried to build. Technology forward has always been where we are. But no, we wouldn't exist as a company without those technologies.
So as we wrap up today, one last question to you. Anything you'd like to leave behind? Anything about Fairmarkit or your personal, journey for the audience?
I think it's probably this concept of fair. We put it in the name, but somehow we sort of gave up on the idea that enterprise procurement could do things in a way that is fair and transparent. It's just too hard. And it's not, it's doable. And not only is it doable, it's worthwhile to do for its own purposes. You can make a difference in the world through lots of different things. You can help out at your local soup kitchen. You can sponsor somebody, you can mentor somebody. But when your company as a whole can help to make the way that companies buy and sell more fair and more transparent, that's a big deal. That shifts how the world works. And so I would say my message isn't necessarily just about Fairmarkit, but with regard to if you're looking into a startup, if you're thinking about your own career, really get to the purpose behind it, and understand the why of what you're doing that goes far beyond we're just going to make some money or we're going to have a very successful company, because that purpose is what can really drive you forward and what can unify your entire organization and unify you with your customers on a common goal.
Brilliantly said. Perfect way to end this interview today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erin, for coming in today.
You're welcome. I'll talk to you whenever you want, Melissa.
Okay. Yeah, next year. See where the journey's led you.
Let's do that.
Bye.